evening, everybody. Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. If you like what you hear today, you can follow us at becomecgpro.com. We do a podcast every 2 weeks. We also run a school, and you can find out more about it at our website. But today, we have great pleasure of having James Blevins with us. James, welcome. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much.
You bet. So James is a production consultant, has a amazing history in the film industry, worked with some incredible people from DD, CineSite, DreamWorks, and is a production consultant, gets to work on really cool movies and help them figure out how to make them, including things that you've all probably heard about, especially The Mandalorian. So yeah, great to have you here. Thanks very much for joining us.
Ed, I wouldn't have missed it, and I was really happy that you called, and thanks for having me. Yeah, anything I can do to help CG Pro and the CG Pro cause is just fine with me.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
To kick it off, I'd love to hear a little bit about you and how you got into this whole business in the first place. Maybe some like early inspirations that kind of led or things that affected your decision making and led you to get into this wonderful industry that we're in.
Yeah. Well, after college, I had a decision to make: either go to New York City and hang with my family, or get as far away from my family as possible, and so that I could just work without their oversight. You know how it is. You have to do it your way. So I showed up in LA in '94 and got myself a job as a driver on a movie called Swimming with Sharks. I was just drawn to the entertainment industry like a moth to a flame, like everyone is drawn from time to time. I used to tell people, don't tell your people to go work in the movie industry. They'll go if they have to, and I was one of them. I turned out that it was an independent that was just trying to, make its way. Swimming with Sharks is one of my favorite movies, and I'm listed as the transpo captain because after 5 days, the producer ran up to me and said, James, do you want to be the transpo captain? And I said, does it pay more? And they said, sure. Said, great. Okay, get all these cars out of the way. And that was pretty much my first jump right then was within the first 5 days. And I thought, I'm on the fast track. So it was about 2 years of on-set stuff, art department, a little bit of camera, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And then I got a temp job at a division of Kodak called CineSite, and the rest is history. Wound up getting sucked into a data management job. They called them tape ops back then because they didn't have a name for them. But basically, it was resource management supporting artists, and that was my job for a couple of decades. Until they put me in front of a flame for the DD commercial department, and then one thing led to another. So that's me in a nutshell. All that led to, after the 15 years of VFX, about 7 years at the Disney Digital Studio at the Hub, and then 4.5 years at Netflix, helping them stand up for the first time. I posted the first originals there with my colleague Jude Babcock and the rest of the post gang. And then we wound up saying goodbye to Netflix during an amazing time. And I went to go work on The Mandalorian, where I was a post-production supervisor. And Jude Babcock was the senior post-production supervisor. And we were sort of a 1-2 punch.
Fantastic. Well, it's a lot of very exciting sounding stuff there. And you studied film originally as well?
No, I studied art. I was always building my own computers. I had a mainframe account when I was 10 years old. I was one of those guys.
Hacker.
And
hacker
nerd.
Kid.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, hacking has this sort of illegal implication. I was just hanging out in BBSs and, marveling at it all from an early age. Built the first Heathkit computer with my uncle. So always had this technological bent, always loved light. I always had a big thing for holograms and lasers and still today, I think that's what I'm really most fascinated about is light and image. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely a good industry to be in if you love light, for sure.
Yes.
We'd be nowhere without it.
I just
So
realized I had to plug in my computer. 1 second.
yeah, no problem. And electricity as well, very important when it
Yeah,
comes to working with computers.
this is one of the first things you learn is that computers need power.
Yeah,
You know, it's one of those lessons, early life lessons.
it's an important one, for sure.
We're good to go.
Okay, great. So, well, there's so much to unpack there. What initially drew you towards working in film? Was there any like movie that you saw that
Oh yeah, no.
really?
Kurosawa's Seven Samurai and Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I made my children watch with me this weekend. Which it's just they give you a placard at Netflix to say, hey, here's your name, and we're gonna put your favorite movie on there. And I couldn't pick between the two, so I had this combination of Seven Samurai and Close Encounters as my placard. I didn't want to be, I couldn't choose between the one. So
Right. Yeah, fair enough. I have them both.
yeah,
Get them
why
in
not?
there.
I,
We had Scott Squires on a few episodes ago, and that was his first job was close. Imagine that. His
yeah, so
first
I'm
job
working
being
with
close to
Phil
camera.
on a ATC project, and I, I had to give him the whole like, oh Phil, I went to go see Close Encounters for the first time, and I'll never look at the cloud effect again. We talked to him a week after uh, who was it? It was it Trumbull? Yeah, Trumbull passed away, and that's when Scott just wanted to open up. That was his first job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I have always been a collaborator. I don't work well alone. I work better with teams, and I've always been someone who goes interdepartment and sort of asks them what they're doing and look at how they're doing it, and then much of my career is patching those teams together and saying, there's a bit of overlap here, or you should talk to these people because they're trying to do the same thing. There's been a lot of that, right? There's either stuff that will advance you in large leaps, but then you can always go back as well and find efficiencies in the stuff that you just built. I really like that part, developing new processes and making technology easy so it stays out of the artist's way.
Right. So good amount of curiosity and taking
very
things apart and
curious.
figuring them out.
I'm very curious. Yeah.
What was it about Close Encounters that really made you want to
Oh,
be in
it's a
film?
little personal, but I mean, I was explaining it to my kids. I said because I saw it when I don't know, I was not that old, 10 or 11 or 12, and with my grandmother, and I think it was a Christmas release, pretty sure. And so we all sat there in the theater, and that movie was about being special. That
Mm.
guy, is sort of like selected along with a bunch of other people, but he's the only one who actually makes it to the ship. Spoiler alert. And he's he's. I knew when I went out of that movie that no doubt I'm on the list. If the aliens come, they're gonna wanna. I'm on the list, right? And it
Right.
just was one of those things that just empowered me as a kid to think, oh yeah, no, that's what being special looks like. That's what it engendered that in me. That's why I love that movie.
That's
And
cool. Yeah, he was like the there's a lot of
yeah,
nutters in the world, but ones that are successful, you don't call them nutters anymore. They're like
that's
they're
right.
geniuses.
That's right. That scene. I'm just watching it again, and that scene where he's pulling apart everyone's backyard, and the geese are going crazy, and all the neighbors are being gathered, and he just absolutely the wife leaves, and then he throws all the bricks in the kitchen window, and then he has a little ladder that goes into the kitchen window, and then pulls the ladder up after him. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's
Yeah,
got it
who's
feels
laughing
quite
now?
relatable. It kind of
Yeah,
it
it does.
definitely I think there's all of us can relate to like that kind of Homer Simpson type thing where you could just imagine yourself doing some of that, filling your living
Well,
room
I
with
know
mashed
you
potato.
have. I know you
Yeah,
have late at night, during the, oh no, we're at the push. It's the push. It's the push. We got to turn over. Got to get it done. We're on
yeah.
version 54, but it's not quite right. Yeah, not quite right.
We've got to order a
Yeah,
lot of mashed potato to get this project done.
that's right. Uh, so
Yeah. So
yeah, you
yeah. So
go.
yeah, really, just I love to ask people what their inspirations. I think it's like really just fascinating to understand. For me, it was Jurassic Park. You know, it was what got me into the industry and made me really curious about how it was made and start to buy all the books, the making of books, and start trying to figure out how they made it, and then try and make it myself. I guess like it took me 23 years that I ended up there working on one of the sequels, but you know, it starts from those moments, those
It
kind of
does, it does,
moments of
and you bump into
curiosity.
these guys. My first like shop job when I got here was in Sun Valley at a place called Atlantic West Effects, and there were two guys working in the shop, and they made animatronic things, really good too. But the one guy they hired, his claim to fame is he had done the iris of the dinosaur. It was was a practical effect. And you know, watching these machinists, you know, do all their work on AutoCAD and then machine stuff that actually worked. That was another one of my during the first year. Uh, bumped into those guys.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. I originally thought I wanted to get into practical effects because it was kind of before I guess CG was really a thing, and then that movie came out and like, and then a lot of the practical stuff started turning digital, and it just made more sense in some ways because there was more work. But
And then
I love the practical stuff.
and then it got fast. Then computing got fast, right? And then that was the thing, right? Yeah, I was standing in the middle of all this technology, and you were too. You're surrounded by it. Um, and Moore's law was in effect, and it was affecting everything. It was affecting compute power, and then you know the SGI impact came online, and you know we started getting elements produced. The water showed up, the fire showed up. You know, all of these evolutions of computer generated effects. Nuke was written, Cineon died, you know, and just and the networks were doubling in size and speed, and you know we could no longer. I remember giving a tour at the beginning of my career of, you know, the entire facility had a terabyte, and some of these volumes were 254 gigabytes in a single volume. It was really something, and uh, and now, and now I just ordered a 2 terabyte drive for $40. You know,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Times
It's
have changed. How
times have
times have
changed.
changed.
Yes, they have.
So, and talking about speed, you know, it's a great way to segue into this new time we find ourselves in filmmaking, which is all about that. It's like going from offline visual effects being possible to it getting faster and faster, and then now being at this point where we're kind of going back to square one through all of the invention of things in real time instead of
It's really weird,
offline.
isn't it? Um, yeah. So VCams, right? Unreal and VCams. Uh, that's all evolving now. We're all jumping on to 5.0 Unreal and seeing the promise of Lumen, right?
Yeah,
And people really, you know, in 5.1 looks like we're gonna see what they do with the VCams. But there's some really interesting people who are dedicated to the idea of really focusing on what our industry needs, which is camera control. There's some interesting software vendors that are getting in that. There's CypherX, used to be Pi Squared. There's another company working on this. Glassbox. Glassbox is working on this stuff.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
they're controlling cameras in a way that we're used to and enabling the labor force that we're used to working with to get into Unreal. I think it's brilliant what they're doing, tying in Maya workflows, for example, and transferring those directly into Unreal. Um, that's a cool trick. And not doing it just for VCam. It's like every single plugin that goes into Maya will also be transferred over and translated into Unreal. So this means that the labor force can learn Unreal on the job, right? I think it'll take,
Mhm.
you know, it would take someone maybe a year and a half, 2 years to be completely, you know, like make the transition. But you have to know that your plan B is, oh, I'll just do it in Maya, right? Oh, it's going to be a while, but suddenly they'll just say, you know what, I am going to do an Unreal. I'm going to change the way I work, and I'm going to stick to Unreal. I mean, you're enabling this right now, right? This is what do you find in your school? Like, what's are you finding a lot of Maya people coming to learn Unreal in your school, or tell me a
Yeah,
little bit about that.
yeah, definitely. I mean, that's where it started for me. You know, I my first question when I wanted to get into visual effects was, what do I do? What do I learn? And I went and asked people that did made visual effects and found out they're mostly using Maya. So I learned Maya, and just by luck found myself at DD at the right time. Jumped into Jungle Book and then into Lion King, and then past that I've been using Unreal for quite a while before that for various different things, but then seeing it pick up and really, jump in after Lion King and The Mandalorian, really being the test case for it and building its strength around that. There's at this point, yeah, there's lots of people who are curious about it, from two major camps, really, the filmmaking side of it and the visual effects side of things. And both sides of the divide, I would guess you could call it. Previously, those two groups didn't mix that much. You'd be a VFX soup, you'd jump about, you'd go between the two. You'd have to learn about both significantly as a VFX soup, but everybody else was pretty much in one side or the other, and they didn't mix all that much. Now we're all coming together a lot more, and that's one of the things I love about it. It's just the connectivity and the collaboration that's happening. But it's also
It's like I said, it's what I love, right? I love those collaborations. I love to introduce people to each other and say, hey, everyone wants the same thing, which is to create this vision, which will then make it all the way to the viewer. And to your point, my clients, a couple of them now, are VFX supervisors who are, now trying to maintain their creative control by allying with the production designer, which they do anyway, right? They have to keep an eye on production design, but also partnering with DPs, right? And then because the VFX soup is usually, it's called in-camera VFX, right? So the war is over; they kind of own that part, right? It's perfectly reasonable then for them to turn to their vendors and the smaller vendors, not your ILMs or NPCs, because they'll just control this entire process. But there are many, many visual effects supervisors with smaller budgets who are trying to bring their talent into the virtual art department and do some look dev in Unreal, and then really find the really nice efficiencies of enabling previs through labor coming from visual effects, but enabling production design.
yeah.
It's pretty amazing to watch. It's happening right now, and so I would encourage you to educate more people quickly, please.
Certainly, I will take that feedback on very seriously. I spend pretty much every waking minute of my life doing that on that mission,
Hurry
and
up, clock's
I
ticking,
will
buddy. Clock's
I'll
ticking.
I'll speed it up for you. Yeah. Yeah, so definitely to your point, lots of people that I, g- I guess there's lots of people who are curious about virtual production in the same way we've been talking about, curiosity. There's obviously things like The Mandalorian that have really brought it into the public eye and intrigued filmmakers and artists
Yeah, there's
alike.
going to be some
And
challenges, right? There's going to be everyone needs to now jump into the pool and find out if it's for them, right? It's not going to be for everyone, but because it is at this phase, there's some things that you really have to target, and you really have to want the benefit that you get from the usage for the ancillary light, for example, right? That is just, there's no denying foreground elements just look perfect, right? And if you can get final pixel off the wall into camera, you're done. For me, I think it's a fantastic medium. And once the production designer understands the relationship of the lens to the wall, and what they're capable of, I've seen like the difference between Mandalorian season 1 and Mandalorian season 2 was really watching the production designers just flourish, right? With the aid of ILM, of course. Yeah, it's that sort of conversation is really what I try and get going as fast as possible, which means that I am really a big fan of previs.
Right. What was it? Tell us what you can anyway, of some of the challenges that you went
All right.
through at the beginning of the
Yeah.
Mandalorian work.
Well, I was brought on the Mandalorian for one thing and one thing only, and that was to really make sure that there was a lot of great work on the wall, and the way we had shot some scenes, the only way to get that work back was to actually do a comp and bring it back, as a visual effects shot. Um, and we suggested that perhaps if we protected for 2/3 of a stop on the wall, then much of the good work that was there, you could get back if you wanted it or lose it, right? But to make the decision to shoot into the toe, and because it's not like reality, right? If I shoot into a shadow with an ARRI, I'm actually going to be catching a lot of light out of the shadows, and I can go dig some out in post. If I shoot at the wall, we don't get a lot of energy down there, right? So if it's gone, there's a good chance you can't dig it out, right? It's already been sort of thrown away. So if you can protect for 2/3 of a stop, raise the wall a bit, understand that what you see in the camera is not the final, not your look, but is going to be what's adjusted by the DAT on, say, like a Sony 310 on the side, and know that that is your hero look. Then you can really give yourself more options in post. That's the thing I was brought in for on Mandalorian. But then I met Clint Spillers and Chris Williams, and we worked on some stuff. I worked on the with the previs department, enabling editorial. Now I could talk about that for a little bit if you like.
Sure. Yeah.
So what we did was, editors like to tell a story their own way. And what was happening was previs was having a fantastic discussion with the directors, the DPs, and of course they would have a whole day of rendering and pointing cameras and everything, and then they'd make a quick time in about an hour, and they send it over to editorial. And the editor was the editor on the show. He wasn't just doing assembly; he would have an opinion, or she would have an opinion, And of course, this would drive Chris and Clint get very frustrated because everyone had gone home already, right? And so that really need to be sort of shored up. And there are ways to do that, and the ways I think we can enable editorial to be more part of the previs conversation. But what we did was we told Chris, hey, it'd be nice if we could pick objects in the foreground of where your VCam's pointing and say, give us an alpha channel. I'm like, what do you need an alpha channel for? Well, because we might actually want to take those elements, separate them out, and the editor might want to do a slap comp. And so they built that in. I think that's now an option on Unreal. And Chris came back, after a season and said, that suggestion, we rolled it into the product. So I think I had a hand in that. That was something I'm very proud of.
Thank you.
Jackie's got some questions here.
Yeah, there's a couple coming in. So yeah, someone's asking about how much post IC VFX need. So I guess there's someone talking about when you shoot on the wall, does it need a lot of post?
Right. If you do it wrong, you need a lot of post.
A tremendous amount of post. All post.
Tremendous amount of post. Yeah, that's right.
Every pixel.
That's right. No, if you do it wrong, it's you're in big trouble. So you need to test, right? I can tell you that the percentage of shots that we intended to be finals, right, that were just in-camera visual effects, we were very successful on the second season of Mandalorian. I actually went and checked, but the difference between first season and second season really showed an amazing improvement in use of the wall. And I could say that it was, I can't really tell you how many shots, but there were not that many shots that we actually had to do something with. And the ones that we did do something with, it was to add something, like a bird flying or something like that.
Rather than taking a bunch of stuff out that didn't work and replace it. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes you shoot off angle and or sometimes the wall gets a little does something weird. The engine will just start to a little tiny something will begin to turn on and off. And
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
Um,
We got another one here. Someone's asking about, um, unless you have more to say about that, or do you have more
well,
to
the
say
previous
about the
thing,
process?
there's a lot to unpack there, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah. So the other question for the listeners here is, can you elaborate, for people in previs enabling production design, what is the connection between previs and virtual art department?
right. So this is an evolving story, right? Um, Production designers will often work with the virtual art department. Well, that's their department, and they will begin to interact with the previous department to create initial models for previs, tech viz, virtual scouting. They're all part of the virtual art department discussion, right? Um, if you have a virtual art department which is made of photoreal capable artists, well, that's going to change things a bit. You're going to wind up breaking the linear sort of the handoff point, right, from classic visual effects, right? You're suddenly really delivering on the promise of in-camera visual effects. Now, many clients want to maintain control through the VFX pipeline. Which is why it's so great that visual effects supervisors are moving into the virtual art departments. Because if they don't, they are at odds with the virtual art department.
Right.
Because they need to have a bit of control over their models, right? And so they'll write into their contract saying, no, that's great what you did there. I love that environment stuff. Boy, that does look real, but actually we've got to do it ourselves. And so we're going to redo all that. And you could say it's a revenue question. It's probably more of an artistic control question. It can be both, right? But I
Yeah.
believe that for those shows that are not working with an ILM or an MPC or someone who really can help the vision of the show, there are many, many, many shows with really talented visual effects supervisors who can enable the virtual art departments to really come up with some fantastic in-camera visual effects. And I think this is a new paradigm. I think this paradigm will enable what I call the new mini studio, right? These people who have been just tirelessly working on Unreal, trying to make their own movie, and now they're beginning to bring real elements into their space consistently, right? So if you get some really talented people who are able to really deliver on the promise of in-camera visual effects, I think that really changes the classic VFX, line. The revenue stream, the work itself.
Right.
See.
Yeah, there's lots of really amazing independent people now doing incredible looking work that's comparable, better than giant visual effects studios 15 years ago, let's say, doing work on their own in engine with just some simple tools. I think it's real. It's like, to me, it seems like it's ripe to have another George Lucas appear pretty soon.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be running these mini studios, right? That's what Lucas did. He ran
Yeah.
a studio, right? From the very beginning. I mean, he was just his show enabled a new way of making movies.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you
Another
elaborate on what
question
type of
here.
shots didn't work in season 1 of The Mandalorian? No, I can't, because they were all so perfect. And I can tell you the types of problems that will occur on walls that very experienced DPs, will share some of this information. If you shoot on a wall, there's a sort of area where whatever capture grid you're using, right, in the camera and the grid on the wall, right, if they're like matched up perfectly or they're kind of like way off sync, that's fine. You won't get any moraying. But if they are just a little off, right, you'll get what's called the Nyquist effect. and that will result in some buzzing and sort of rainbow chroma problems, moiraying. It can be dealt with. The color stuff is easier to deal with than the buzzing one. But it's something that you need to worry about sometimes when you're shooting in this zone. There's a zone for your camera, right? That will sort of be a bad place to shoot for a wall.
Should be called the disco zone.
It's that don't go here. Here there be dragons. Here there not be dragons. So anywhere from like 6 feet, if you're really lucky, this sort of depends on the pitch of the thing and also the type of camera you're using, back to like 15 feet for the wall, right? Which is why these enormous walls work so great, because you're never that close to the wall. But it's that's a gotcha. And the way you deal with that is that you throw everything sort of just on the other side of the depth of field. And so that's the first trick, right, that people do, is that they kind of blur the wall. You blur the wall, you blur the lines, the Nyquist goes away, right? That may not be how people shoot. I can think of plenty of directors who, when they shoot, they like it crisp. Their shutter angle is small, right? And it is about symmetry, right? Not about romantic sort of, mushiness. You also learn when you're talking to DPs that you can't use terms like mushy when you're talking to them. They get very upset.
It's offensive, yeah. So yeah, there's some limitations, essentially, is what you're saying in terms of what you can and can't do, basically, in those spaces.
And don't forget the audio problem too, right?
Yeah.
There is a consistent echo, but the key is a consistent echo, right? So that means that you can throw noise canceling on an echo, and that trick just works, right? We're less worried about the noise mitigation on those walls, because there's really no getting around it. And thankfully, there are lots of fixes for fixing, getting rid of echo.
Right.
But go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's another question, but if you had a thought, then finish it.
No, I could. What's the other question?
Somebody, a very specific question here: is pixel pitch between 2.3 to 2.8 the best to consider? I know there are more tight pixel pitches, but is there a standard?
There is no standard. There, I said it.
Good. All right.
Thanks, there is no standard. I believe, right, that the smaller the pixel pitch, the closer to the wall you may be able to shoot. That being said, remember that we're dealing with patterns and that sort of thing. So there might be a new danger zone a little further back, but I doubt it. Testing. If you get on the big stages, that's $150,000 a day burning, right? So you better have your tech viz done. The last thing you want is your DP to walk into a stage and go, oh, the airplane is, okay. That's and that means that you did not do your job in preparing them for this shoot, that they're suddenly realizing that things are where they didn't expect them to be. That's not a thing you want to have happen when you walk onto their set, in prep.
Can you tell us some good tips for good tech viz, good preparation?
The best advice I ever got for setting up a shoot is to run it. This is from Clint Spillers. Run it like it's a reshoot, or run it like it's pickups. That means that every department head meets. They look at the pages, right, and they understand, because reshoots, everyone wants to leave anyway. So that they're all about efficiency. They're all about getting the right stuff on the stage and off the stage as quickly as possible. And there's a huge discussion about how to do that. So that is probably one of the best pieces of production advice I ever got, was run your virtual productions as if it were a pickup or a reshoot, because that way you'll maximize the most expensive thing, which is the stage time.
Copy that. Somebody here is asking, how far is the camera away from the wall? Is there some standard distance away from the wall?
Yeah,
And
it's again test, right? I don't find any problems, usually certainly past 15 feet, right? When you're making these models, and in the virtual environments, you're doing it with the perspective of where the wall is going to be. At first, you're free from all that, right? You just create a space and you start setting cameras and coming up with dreams and no holds barred, right? You can expand the space, you can shrink the space, you can make the spaceship smaller, larger, but then you got to sort of set it, right? And then you got to plop your virtual production stage into it and say, okay, this is where it's going to be, and that differentiates what is going to be practical and what is going to be virtual, and that will dictate a bunch of things, including how close to the wall you're wanting to get. It's interesting. One of the promises of virtual production has been the ability to go do pickups, right? And
Right.
so if your walls are tuned, and I mean in terms of color and luminance, and you have two separate walls, like one panel and like one big wall, you can do different things on your close-ups, right? Than you could, on the bigger wall, right? There's just sometimes it's good to go sort of small. It'll give you some interesting options. One of them is cost savings. There's a new wall. Have you heard about Magic Box's virtual production truck? It's on a semi. It folds out in 20 minutes, right? And it has its ceiling, three walls. Sorry, this is just the prototype, but the production one's going to be even bigger. But it all sort of comes out of this 18-wheeler, right? And the way the stage folds out, you actually roll a car up right onto it and do your car shots. But they shot something just the other day on the using Santa Monica pier plates, which was just amazing. Let's see here.
I'm just having a look at it. Yeah, it looks really cool. Magicbox.ninja. Is that the website?
Ninja. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Actually, that truck is now parked in the back of Stargate Studios. Sam Nichols is guiding them into how to integrate with camera.
Oh, amazing. Another question that's come in here. Somebody's asking, is there any resistance from the visual effects post world to virtual production? Basically,
yeah,
I think that's the question.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's the wrong kind of resistance. The resistance,
not the Star Wars kind of resistance.
It's more like the Borg resistance. Resistance is futile. There's no point in resisting the way it's people are resisting these days. It's about creative control, right? And you can't. That's the worst reason to not adopt the technology, is because of creative control. That means people will go around you so fast, it'll make your head spin. You may be in business for another 2 years, but if you say, no, we're working this way because this is the way our VFX pipeline is, and this is the way it's going to be, the world will move around you.
Right.
So that's okay. People can resist, but if they are resisting, they might ask themselves why, right? Mm-hmm. And if the answer turns out to be, well, I gotta get paid, or I'm losing a revenue stream, well, I can't tell you. And remember, I used to work at Kodak, and there was a company that couldn't get out of their core business strategy to save their lives. And very smart people.
Which time did you work there? Was it toward like near where they went, the Kodak?
Cinesite was owned by Kodak, right?
Yeah.
And I was there when they bought their first digital camera. and I turned to Gil Gagnon, who was operations guy at the time, VP. And he said, I turned to him and I said, how long do you think it takes a $15 billion balloon to deflate? And it turns out it was about $1 billion a
Pretty
year.
quick,
Yeah,
right?
it was pretty quick. Pretty
So
amazing.
what's the solution then for you for anyone that's out there resisting,
Bravery.
right?
You're gonna have to,
Take
if
it
you
on.
want, you're gonna have to take it on, and it's gonna hurt. And you gotta, all that money you thought was coming your way, you're gonna have to look yourself hard in the face and realize that if you want to take the short-term gain and get out, and sort of move into other businesses, that's fine. But I like Seth Hallen is he runs Light Iron, and I remember he was involved in discussion about a new process, color grading in the cloud, that might be a a threat to their core business. And Seth just laughed at me and just said, "There's no threat to the business," and he's absolutely right. That's the attitude to take. You just need to pivot. You need to be agile. You need to be brave, right? So
Yeah,
it's the whole business is littered with people who said, because this is the way we do it.
yeah, for sure. And look how different it is now compared to how it was 20 years ago. What do you have any advice to, say, people in the visual effects industry who are thinking about virtual production? What would your advice be to them to like maybe start looking into this kind of stuff if they're still in the traditional workflows?
I don't know what I would tell the individual artists, because they have such, they've been in there, even the compositors, they're all sort of, they're supported so well by, like, people doing mocap and roto, and just everyone is contributing to them for final comp. And if you go to, like, the people who are working in Maya and that sort of thing, they're gonna move towards these sort of virtual production enabling processes. The thing I think that needs the most help, that I think a good VFX person could contribute to, good VFX supervisor, um, is creating a new game called Let's Make a Movie. I've said
Hmm.
this before, but I really believe it's true. Um, you know, we 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 have Unreal. Unreal has been running in the cloud for a long, long time, and I would like to see a game where we would just go meet there without the help of an ILM, without the help of, it's just something. It's an add-on, right? It's sort of like like Pix, what Pix became, right? Or um, sort of it became, or Netflix, right? Netflix suddenly showed up everywhere in every area. Clearview is another one that just sort of piping. It was just showing up on our phones and our tablets. It'd be nice if we had this app called Make a Movie, which would go to a shared space where we could start to um, talk about a scene, and people could add elements that supported a substantial amount of geometry, and also stayed there when you logged out, right?
And
That would be,
persistence, yeah.
yeah, have some persistence. That would be really great. I really want that to happen, because if that does happen, then everyone could just meet there and start setting their cameras and having their conversations, and it'd be really enabling.
It sounds like some kind of utopian metaverse dream.
It doesn't it? I mean, isn't that so? Like, if you did that, right, then you could do the thing of, like, oh, I'm going to move my camera, set my camera, but then you would also be ready to, like, you'd have the whole world in your head, so you could just free yourself, right? And then you're prepared for what's next, what the next deliverable is, which is the whole open world that you've built, right? Because that's sort of what you need. You're sort of probably going to wind up contributing to, and for much of this metaverse content is stuff that is tied into games and episodics, and so that's why I think working in these 360 spaces will really engender new ways of thinking, new talent. Uh, yeah, it is utopian, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's happening. It's we can see evidence of it for sure.
Hmm.
What needs do you see out there in this space? There's a lot of talk about there's a lot of demand for people, and it's really hard to find people. What are some of the biggest needs that you see in your day to day?
Right. Well, obviously, the people that you're training, we need them. I think that I think some people outside of media and entertainment are coming in and helping subsidize some of this training as well. Boeing is coming in; they have a real interest in getting people up on Unreal, right? For
Hmm.
it's great for manufacturing. It's great for all sorts of things. So it's great to see that those things are being subsidized, and um, and that's engendering also the same abilities to be applied to art, right? Um, I I just think the labor needs to come along, and then the hardest part, right, which is getting trust. It's not it's not just what you're working on; it's how you're working on it, right? It's really important. And so when you're working collaboratively with other people, it's so critical to be honest, to be open, to be undefensive. I mean, this is truly collaborative. And you may have fought tooth and nail to get to a position where suddenly you have to be there. Um, which is why sometimes some of the geniuses we work with are so unpleasant. But I think it's really important to truly collaborate, and you'll find that you often will get as good as you give if you work that way. It's really important, and you'll gain trust. Once you have the trust and you're already skilled, well, then you're just going from show to show to show to show. If that's what you want to do.
Right. So yeah, some of the soft skills essentially just as important as knowing how to do the technical stuff,
Yeah,
or the artistic
I
stuff.
think it's true. Don't you, Ed?
Yeah, yeah, big time. Yeah, I think it's something that people don't teach in schools in general. I think it's some of that
Oh,
stuff
here's a
is
good
some of the most
question.
important.
Yeah, here's a good question. In your opinion, does a brain bar is it necessary in every virtual production? I have managed to get the okay. First of all, we have to stop calling it brain bar.
But
Uh,
who's going to stop? Who's
who's
going
going
to
to stop?
stop it though, James?
The
No one.
DPs. The
Everyone keeps
DPs are going to
saying.
stop it. The DPs
Everybody
are going to
keeps saying I
say,
hate the name.
we're smart too. We have a whole book full of really smart stuff, and no one's calling us like brain camera. They're not so smart. There's a little bit of that going on, right? So, virtual production
Yeah,
technologists, support team, something. Anyway, that's it. It's kind of fun to watch them
we'll
haggle
work
at
on it.
Brad Bar. That's right.
Yeah.
Is it necessary? Well, someone's got to run the Unreal, right? Someone's got to run it. Someone's got to move the lights, right? There's got to be a virtual reality gaffer, right? That's all got to happen. And it can't just be the virtual production supervisor also twiddling all the knobs, right? There's an immense amount of metadata which is being produced for these stages. All of that needs to be properly recorded and culled and managed. So I have gotten it down to about 4 people, but that is, and I've seen some other stages got it down to 4 people. And Mandalorian was substantially larger than that, but we were
Yeah.
starting out, right? We were just figuring it all out. And I think actually the commitment to that kind of size, it's all in the movie. It's all there. It's all in the show.
Yeah, so the number of factors involved in the budget is another one. And yeah, going back to Jungle Book example, there was like one and a half, two maybe people doing it there. It was just way too much, and
Yeah.
there's been a real effort since then to have more help because it's too much responsibility to have. Not yeah, you definitely need multiple people helping out in those environments, especially high pressure environments.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Well, we should do a like a competition for the rename the brain bar
You should.
because it comes up
Also,
so much.
the thing. So remember when we were working at DD, the Flame guys were like working with the commercial clients, and they'd come in and like they're sitting there in the back, room and get their lattes and be like, oh, a little bit more pink, oh, a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more. They do all that stuff. Um, it, it's it's you have to make sure that doesn't happen on the virtual production stage. And so the real trick for an Unreal operator is not to get sucked into that, you know, but to work with the production and the assistant director to discern what is a reasonable and unreasonable request. Because if you don't, you've got to tell the production, the director just asked me to do something that's going to take 2 hours. Do we have a long lunch, or should we, what do we do? Right. And doing that delicately is really key. Discerning how to tell people that is an unreasonable request properly. That's a skill.
That definitely, especially in certain environments. Somebody asked a question here. Is anyone building a spherical LED volume? I've actually seen a quarter sphere LED volume.
Well, what about the one going up in Vegas?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I haven't
mean,
turned it on yet, but yeah,
no,
it
but
could
isn't
get used for that
yeah, well, I mean, I got to go see the one, the prototype that they put up
in
next
Burbank.
to the Burbank Airport, right?
Yeah,
You're supposed to get me in there, aren't you? Aren't you supposed to get us
working on it.
in? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
as we're speaking publicly, then yeah. Yeah, it's cool. It's amazing what those guys are doing, I think. And yeah, certainly
Yeah,
mainly intended for shows, but for sure you could imagine.
I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know what it's going to bring to the table, but I love that it's being done, right? I
Yeah,
know that there's an LED sphere going the outside and there's a sphere on
that's
the
right.
inside, right? So that should be really good.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how much it is to switch it on. That's always the thing with like a lot of the stages I've been on. So how much does it cost to actually turn this on? Or like go out the back and switch all the Jennies on and power it up for like an
yeah,
hour. How
but
much does
if
that
they're
cost?
LEDs compared to, like, I mean, think of the light shows that they've been putting. Think of the laser shows that they put on and stuff. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the amps required to light LEDs. It ain't that bad. Not for the impact that you get, right?
When
I
you've
wonder how
got
bright they're
a
going to be.
20,000 seat venue, it's a lot of LEDs.
I can't wait.
I can't wait too. I think I'm really looking forward to
Isn't
it.
it funny that what we're doing now is, instead of all putting on Oculus and meeting somewhere in the middle, we're now creating systems which are shared Oculus experiences. You
Yeah.
know, we're surrounding ourselves again, right? And
People like being around other people. It's
well,
amazing how people
depends on the
thought,
person.
well, yeah, I mean, not everyone,
Now,
for sure. Yeah, I did see a view. I saw a quarter sphere LED volume. It was, and I don't know if it's being used yet, but somebody had built a quarter sphere there, like a smaller one.
yeah,
So the idea being, I guess, being able to start lifting the camera up.
I wonder if we could shoot on it. I mean, I wonder if we could shoot on the Vegas one. I wonder if we want to shoot on it. You know, I have so many
Yeah,
questions. You know,
let's go ask them. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, you could for sure if you can afford to get them to switch it on for your production. That's the
Hey
question.
man, if you don't want me to use it, don't build it. You know, I mean, look,
You
are we
just
here to
sneak
make
in there.
something or aren't we? You know, uh,
You're just going to
you know,
sneak in there and turn it on when they're not
you
looking.
know what? I agree. Some shows don't deserve to be made. That's true, and they shouldn't. Right. So keep your wall off. But if you're interested in making something, call me. That's my attitude.
What are you most excited about in virtual production?
Phase one is over. Right. Now we're going to start dealing with controlling energy flow on these walls, right? Some interesting panels may get manufactured that are going to deal with some of the lack of full spectrum light. The full spectrum light problem will evolve into a full spectrum light solution. And then we're going to start dealing with motion on these walls, right? There's something about shooting plates which has you filmed the motion. You selected when you shot the plate. You selected the gate, right? The shutter. Sorry, and now you've gotten the sort of motion you want on a plate. But what about Unreal? What is the relationship between the VCam shutter and the camera shutter? And are you going to be around? Are you going to be able to play around with that to get the sort of motion that you're looking for off these walls? Because remember, if you look at a wall with your eye and things are moving, it kind of judders, right? That all goes away in camera, right?
Mhm.
But that means that the thing that applies light and motion and blur to an image doesn't exist on a wall. It's just bup, 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 right? There's none of this, reality's got a lot of data in it, right? And so,
It does, yeah, too
yeah,
much.
too much. So it's going to be an interesting challenge to see, how we begin to work with the ASC to really move forward with some of this motion stuff. It's becoming a big thing. Motion itself has become a big thing because everyone's TVs are now so bright that they are the judder is becoming really annoying. And at some point, someone really important is going to have to say, "Thanks for running my show at 48 FPS in the theater. Why aren't the streamers doing that for me? And I want to do a motion grade." So it's that's also very interesting to me. There's this company Pixelworks, TrueCut. They're going to be dealing
Mm.
with motion grades. So there's all sorts of weird things happening. I think all the stuff that's evolving is going to be having to deal again with light levels and motion and capturing that light.
Somebody has a question here saying, um, with color grading in the cloud, will we get to a place where the data from the camera will travel directly to the consumer without ever having to be captured on a separate media?
Mm. All right. Well, that's called broadcasting,
Yeah.
right? And it happens today. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. And you get that. I can tell you that I
I
did.
guess they're probably in saying, well, broadcast virtual production XR. I don't know whatever you call it.
No. I would love to hear what they're thinking, because it's an interesting. I mean,
It's saying
live is a
specifically,
thing. There's a big movement in live stuff, and he's absolutely right. There's some Microsoft is partnering with some really interesting people who are doing a lot. They're going to start augmenting a lot of broadcasts in interesting ways, and that's all starting to happen now. That's a whole nother career path, by the way, and one that's going to be very fruitful, I think. Um, I did shoot a show using Amazon Web Services and a 10 gigabit pipe, where I actually was able to take the camera card of the RA-RAW 4K, which was recorded at 740 megabytes per second. I was able to load it up into the cloud at 800 megabytes per second. So I was able to go up to the cloud faster than the camera could record it. But because we're a production, we have to copy because we have to be bonded, right? We have to be insured.
there's rules. Yeah.
As rules. But once it went up to the cloud, I made one more copy and that was done. I did the whole show, including the color grading and 444 10-bit, all right off the cloud, off an AWS FSX instance. It's pretty
So
cool.
that's very cool. Yeah, I think we're always chasing that, like how much data you're pulling off the camera is increasing, and then the bandwidth is increasing in the internet. And anyway, I think the person asking the question is asking about the kind of like this idea of a live visual effects pipeline, essentially, at that point.
Well, if it's going to happen, I think it's going to happen in music first. These I think it's going to be like you saw Ariana Grande's, you saw there was another concert more recently that was sort of a fortnight event, but I think that's a little bit headed in that direction, right? Where you join as your avatar, and all that was sort of pre-recorded. But Ed Sheeran did something about a year ago, which suddenly, I was just sitting in my chair, and suddenly Instagram said, "Hey, you want to see Ed Sheeran sing a concert?" And I said, "Sure." Suddenly, there I was with Ed Sheeran, and it was a live streaming broadcast. All sorts of interesting things. If you have a good idea in that space, pursue it.
We're going to take one last question here. Someone's asking, what would you say is the future of green screen and Unreal Engine? It seems like everyone is kind of drifting towards the LED only. Any thoughts on that?
Right. Well, if you chose a virtual production wall, that meant that you were organized, you planned out your shots, and because it's a very expensive way to shoot. So green screen is beautiful. It's wonderful. It doesn't, unless you get really lucky and have a gaffer who really knows what they're doing, lining up your foreground elements to match your background in green screen, that's the trick, right? And this is kind of why we did the virtual production thing to begin with. right? Was that ancillary light suddenly you cannot see the seam. It goes away. And it's such a higher level of quality. It's just it's hard to compete. That being said, you look at the Moses system, they'll shoot at higher frame rates and you capture it so that you're capturing every other frame so that you're getting the background wall, but then you're also getting a green screen shot. And it looks a little fuzzy when you're actually doing it, but in camera, you're getting two separate feeds. So you're getting a green screen at the same time. I think this is an interesting time that, people are doing this because they're not exactly sure about things. They're not confident. So I think that green screen and the visual effects supervisors who've been working on green screen will like to have it around for a plan B until they find a little bit more confidence.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I want to ask you, finally, just is there anything that you'd like to share? Is there anywhere people can follow you and the things that you're doing? Anything that you want to share with us?
Thanks. I'm very careful now. I'm fortunate enough to pick the projects that I want to pick. And if you're fortunate enough to get in that position, it's a wonderful time to be working because you can sort of pick and choose. It took me 25 years to get there. This is not disheartening news because if you remember back to your DD days, Ed, those were some really great years,
Mm.
So I guess my advice is don't be daunted by how long you think it's going to take to be working the way you want to work. Enjoy the fact that you are working in an incredible industry, that you were probably right to come here, that you should count your lucky stars if you can. And it's just a great industry to be working in, and I love the people around it. So hang in there if there's a rough time for you, and if it isn't, hurry up and get it done.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, very, very exciting time. I think it's the most exciting time I've seen in visual effects, really. Just the amount of innovation that's going on at the moment, the amount of change, it is a very cool time.
Democratizing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people being able to do amazing things on their own on a single machine. It's
And the designs coming from all over the globe, just amazing. The stories coming out of virtual production in VR space. Who knew that that part of the virtual reality storytelling was going to be a safe place for just some of the most moving stories I've ever seen in my life. Just incredibly heartfelt.
and AI. Any thoughts on how that's starting to influence creativity and the technical side of things?
For now, technology wants what we want, and it's great. I personally believe that technology is an extension of our own evolution. And as far as AI goes, it's going to happen quicker than you think, but it's not happening tomorrow.
Well, there you have it, folks. James, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. That's about it. I'm not a big fan of social media in general. I'm a lurker. But LinkedIn is mostly where I do my social stuff. I can't believe you invited me to this wonderful podcast and CG Pro. You're doing such great work, and keep those talented people coming.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
We will. Absolutely. Not stopping. But thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. This is a great conversation. Hopefully we'll I think it seems like we have hours more that we could do, so maybe we'll have to have you back sometime and carry it on.
Thanks much. Thanks very much.
You bet. And thank you also to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in tonight. If you're tuning in live or in the recording. And we'll be back again in a couple of weeks with another episode. If you're interested in what we do as a school as well, you can follow us at becomecgpro.com. We have a list of classes and various things up there. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and I hope you have a great evening.